welcome to the dungeon with Harlan and Andrew.
Hi, hello. We're
We're
here.
here.
We're live. Welcome to the dungeon. I'm Harlan Kelly.
I'm Andrew Orvedahl. This is episode 6, I think, already.
Yeah, we're flying. Oh,
Flying along. This is a show where we chat about tabletop role-playing games with people who run tabletop role-playing games, most commonly Dungeons & Dragons, but other games as well. We have a special guest this episode. We have my real-life friend, Josh Smith. Great DM, great player, very fun on both counts. So thanks for doing the show with us, Josh.
Yeah.
I just remember this funny sort of anecdote, I guess. I don't know if I ever told you this, Josh, but we have a mutual friend. His name is Ravi, and I was helping Ravi out at his house. And Josh used to live there, and he'd moved out, and we were chatting. And Ravi was like, yeah, he's up there all the time playing these tabletop role-playing games, just screaming. And I could hear it throughout the house. And I was like, oh, that sounds great. And I was like, that actually sounds really fun. But that was Robbie's exit review of Josh being up there.
Yeah, I get told I'm like completely unemotive in real life until I start GMing a game. And then everything comes on. So
yeah, I get the same.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
I wish that was true about me. People are like, they're just like, yeah, of course. So
Emotive
Like,
and
"Are you mad at
emotive.
me?"
That's probably the healthiest. Yeah. So just real quick, we like to ask everybody right up top, what is your like personal history with role-playing games?
Personal history, probably evenly split between being a player and a GM. I started, like a lot of people, with 5th edition in 2014. I was going through some like hard work time, and it was like an opportunity to be completely incompetent and unloved. And I love characters like that. And then I played through, started off in Homebrew World, did a few campaigns with a friend, Joe, who's has been in a lot of my games. Great player, great GM. And starting in 2017, I decided that I didn't have enough D&D in my life. I was working at the Art Institute of Chicago and like being very cerebral all day, and I needed like a break. And in long critiques and playing D&D was like such a night and day experience that it kind of like, once I ran a game, I was like, oh, I need to do this all the time. And it just kind of became my life. And I've been doing that ever since.
Nice. Very cool. I've actually not played very often with you at all as a GM, but I have played with you when I've been running games. But both me and our mutual friend Dylan were talking about how you're like, the way you run combat is like so efficient and precise. It was pretty amazing. It's just like every single little tick, like check there. It was great.
wait, so I want to know about that. Like, I haven't played with you, but what do you think, Josh, like makes Andrew say that about you?
I think I say that he might say that because specifically in the game that we're both playing in, or that I'm running for him and Dylan, it's all about combat. So you want to kind of like make the intensity of the combat feel like on point, and everything kind of moves so that there's a sense of urgency there. I've also had a bad habit of running like super epic combats where there's like 60 enemies on the board, and like you have to find ways to like just cut to the chase, like give time for flower descriptions when it's necessary, but if the focus is on like keeping the momentum going, then you just gotta like just keep burning through, and try to highlight the things that the players are getting excited about. But if it's not about the players, then I try to skip it.
Yeah.
I also think playing with my son has helped a little bit, like just keeping him engaged. can be sometimes challenging. So especially in combat, he kind of comes to life and like really focuses on it.
Yeah. How old's
I
your
also
son?
just like strategy games too. He's 12.
Okay. We've done a lot of like kid running for kid talks on the dungeon, and I've had friends without kids just be so excited about hearing about it because
Yeah.
it's a
Some of-
silly game, and it's just cool to hear
Yeah.
how what engages kids.
Yeah, you
Josh's
can
son.
you can tell that you like when they're interested. Like they don't conceal that at all. Like if
Yeah.
they're checked out, they're checked out.
Right, but
Josh's son will literally walk away from the game table.
Go look at a book
Yeah.
and then come back and be like, didn't miss a beat.
I feel like every time we've talked about this and we get into it, the advice that folks have for running for kids is just good advice for running for adults too. Like
Yeah.
it's just more direct, which is great. So, but like I feel like I read a lot about D&D online and watch a lot of like DM tip
Yeah.
videos, and I think
Oh, sure.
it's a very, very common question. It's like, how do I make combat not feel like it's trudging along? And I think that the thing you said that stuck out to me immediately is like, if it's not about the player, kind of skip it, go past it, because it is kind of about the player. But are there any like tactical things that you've found that are like things in your toolbook or that you have just kind of discovered has worked for you?
Um, I think one of the things that I find works is give the monsters fewer hit points that are in the player's handbook. Make them hit just a little bit harder, a little bit more often, and like things resolve pretty quickly. I'm not the kind of game master where it's like if it's not in the book, I'm not going to do it. Like
Yeah.
I give my players a lot of flexibility because most of the players that I've played with are all artists, so they're kind of used to like bending the rules to suit a situation. And I have a background as a professor, so I just like talk all the time in that setting, and so you have to kind of like be flexible and let the conversation dictate like what's happening on the board. I'm not actually very good at strategy. I play like some strategy games, but I just kind of like think about how would this look in a 1980s movie through VHS? Like, would it be badass?
Yeah.
Then yes. Is it like, what's the scene? Who are the players? What did they get a kick out of? What kind of media do they like? And just try to like lean into that. I'm just like a child of the 80s, so a lot of this stuff is like really probably too epic. But I enjoy it, and my players seem to enjoy it most of the time.
In Josh's game, he told us right up front. He was like, I'm going to be definitely focusing on cover rules and things like that. So right off the bat, I was like, okay, I'm going to like really pay attention to that. And it instantly made me a better player, especially as this like little wimpy sorcerer. It was like, of course, stay behind the corner, peek out, use a spell, come back around the corner. And it was like working I was like, wow, I've never done so well as like a weak caster type. And then toward the end, it was going great, and we were progressing through this dungeon so well.
Yeah,
And
you
at
guys
the
are pro.
end, this little dragon shows up, the like boss of this dungeon, and we were so excited. We just line up in this hallway perfectly. All four of us just lined up for like the easiest dragon breath attack in all of D&D history. Got so messed up, almost wiped. But it was funny. I was like, oh yeah, all of that discipline just goes out the window as soon as you get the boss is on the map, and it's like, all right, let's go get him, and you just want to run down there into the room. But
I actually think what's funny, I'm sorry to interrupt, because I think you misremember a little bit, is like there was initially like kind of a wall of enemies, and you guys get smoked, and then you immediately do the same thing again.
oh, with the dragon.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sorcerer dude messed us up too, for sure. And the guys with spears. That was a hard hallway. That was a tough.
Yeah.
But I was like, oh, I'll just kind of be behind this other character, like that's cover.
Yeah, because it's funny that you said like, oh, I want to be able to just like go with the flow, and like not and let things go more. But then just by you saying that, like, oh, I'm gonna be paying attention to this rule, Andrew's already as a player thinking about this more. I think that's the thing I struggle with as a DM is like I do want to just like go with it and make whatever the player wants happen, but like a thing as a player I've experienced is like I want that consistency. I want to know when I get smoked by the dragon that it's like well I did know that like I needed cover or whatever.
100% our fault, my fault for sure.
Just because we rolled really good on our stealth checks doesn't mean that it knows its own lair, and we're a bunch of cocky jerks. I like combat in D&D. I feel like it like play to the genre. I've tried like different homebrew rules for like social combat or like very RP focused scenes, or even like series of sessions. But there's nothing more exciting for new players and experienced players where it's just like, here's the map, figure it out. Don't die. And I think maps are like kind of like my entry point for like thinking about a story, is like, how do I create a challenging situation, because the story's right there. And I think like the history of Dungeons and Dragons is about the dungeon because there are kind of boundaries on it. If you can go anywhere and do anything, that can actually produce like kind of a flat scenario and a flat game. But if you kind of can, put a little bit of a bumper on it on either side and let them, jump around all they want, everybody's having a great time. Yeah.
Are you a Matt Colville fan?
I like him. I find his style of play challenging as a viewer. But I can imagine being at that table just to be like amazing. I've read his books. I like his tone and his world.
Yeah. I just know he was like the first person who taught me that. I really like his how to run a game video videos, and he put out one of those videos that said it was like talking like advocating for the dungeon, advocating for that confined space, and I, as a player, want to be able to do anything, so I want to give my players the ability to do anything. And I think exactly what you're talking about is kind of like, and that ties into the rules too, of just being like, here's how this works. Now do whatever you want. Can be so liberating for players to have.
I want you to crit on that ogre, but you're still 5 feet away, and he's going to smash you. Do you still want to do that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I've played and run Dungeon World. I don't know if you guys have played it. I actually really like the system. It's like great for one-shots and like an intro to D&D. It's not a crunchy system, but I've had probably the most fun running a game with that system. And it's because the dice, and I think maybe Andrew's mentioned this in previous episodes, like when you failed, when you've succeeded. And like that gives you confidence to like push the story forward, and consequences can be as dramatic as the players will allow. It gives the players a lot of agency in the game as well.
Natural ones are as interesting as natural 20s, and this is just like my little mantra to new players all the time. Is like, it's okay if you fail. It's good. It's fun.
Yeah, definitely.
Also, I liked in your games, Josh, not always, but every now and then you would tell us the DC, which is a nice mix between, I like the mystery DC because that's part of the fun, is like, ooh, did I do it? But also it's cool to every now and be like, this is hard and I'm setting the DC at 20. And it's like, okay, everything's out there in the open, everything's on the clear. That's kind of a cool technique to every now and then throw the number out there.
Yeah, it's a game. Like, immersion can happen in its own way, and everybody like buys in. They have the movie going in their own brain. It's a different movie. So, pull back the curtain a little bit and have a DC explicitly stated. Yeah, it doesn't hurt.
Yeah,
and it can sometimes raise stakes.
Yeah, I mean that's the fun of death saves too. Like when you see that number,
11.
Yeah,
and it takes away any like fudging. Like you said, the stakes are concrete. It's like maybe the DC was 20 in your head, and the player rolled like a 19, and you're like, boy, they really need this. Like, yeah, you did it. But if it's 20 and they rolled a 19, it's like, no, you did not do it.
I felt that the other day when we were running the Roper, in the Better Than Heroes, when you all didn't hit on an 18, when I was editing the clips, you can see all of your faces just go, what? Like, uh-oh.
Yeah.
Like, and even though I know
Oh,
you
no.
know, yeah, I've run ropers for you before, Andrew, too, and I still think like
they're
in
very
that
hard.
in that moment of like, oh, this doesn't work. There's still just like, oh yeah, crap moment. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, that was good. Josh is also a fantasy map maker. He has an Instagram called Every Map a Story. He makes these very cool maps. So I wanted to ask you, as somebody who makes maps, if you have any, I don't know exactly what the question is, but like, is there like a prevailing theory that you use? Do you study real life maps before you apply them to fantasy maps? Like, what is sort of your work process for creating your own maps?
Yeah. Well, I have a background in art, and so I kind of like lean into my drawing there. I know not everybody has those skills, but I think when I'm making a map, I want to like typically focus on like just imagining what is the scenario that might be you know, that could take place here. I will often just do like a quick, like literally 30-second sketch, scan it and like kind of mess with it in Photoshop and then take it into the drawing program. It's like sort of a mixture between doing stuff hand drawn, which has like a looseness and a vitality to it, and then, you know, adding a little bit more details, adding a little more concrete space for the players, because like it's kind of a shorthand. You kind of can put a couple of things in there and the players will immediately gravitate towards it. And if it's interesting, you know, if it's not just more than rocks or a road or a bridge, that can also sort of shape what's going on. So like even like a little village in the corner of a map is something to explore, is like texture to like, you know, populate the players' imaginations.
That's awesome,
Totally.
man. That's so I want to see. I want to see your maps now. You know, I just want to see like all of your. I want to
Cool,
see
yeah.
like how you kind of approach it in different ways. Well, Andrew, we have a bunch of questions in chat today. So do you want
Oh,
to?
sweet. Well, let's get to our roll table and then we'll get to our chat questions. So, yeah, we've got a roll table. If you want to just roll a d20, and
I
then
brought my lucky
question
die because I
Ooh.
rolled a one on camera. I don't know if the questions changed, but I rolled a 17.
they do sometimes change. Oh, we haven't asked this one before. 17. Do you have, and I know Harlan has answers for this one. Do you have favorite music to play in games? This is more of a back 100 years ago when we could play these games in person. It was always fun to
Yeah.
play music for people, and now it's a little trickier to do. But I was just curious if you had like, if you even like to play music and what
I
that music
actually
would be.
don't. I think I have a really hard time filtering out information. And so if like music's in the background, unless it's like in a super, you know, tight group, it like completely throws me off. But I love preparing D&D to like Magic Sword.
Oh
It
yeah.
just like sets the tone,
Totally.
regardless of the genre, just something like upbeat. Um, and like when I prepare, I will often like go on a long bike ride or do something really physical, usually with music. And there's like a, you know, a synesthesia of like pairing a scene with a particular song that sometimes happens.
What?
But yeah, I would say I'm probably not. I'm much more visual than I am like auditory. So it just like throws me off. But you know, when I've seen it, like, you know, in Critical Role, they use it to great effect. Like having those sound effects can really immerse you. Um, and if I were playing like a very horror focused game, I would certainly consider it, because like that can completely change the situation, take you out of
Totally.
your basement.
Definitely. Harlan, what are some of your go-to?
I-
Harlan's music is so creative and it's hard to. I'm just the soundtracks. I'm pretty like meat and potatoes. Like here's the soundtrack to a movie that is dramatic. Like
Oh,
the Harlan
actually,
goes all
I
over.
love the Road soundtrack. Or
Oh,
anything
yeah.
by like,
From the
yeah,
movie The
like
Road.
yeah, like, and I think in the game that I'm running right now, like when I'm doing prep, I often like do that because it's like all about traveling across a wasteland.
Totally.
And that, like, having read the book and seen the movie and, you know, heard the soundtrack a bunch, it kind of like has that bleak quality, I
Yeah, I'll have to revisit that.
Yeah,
My go-to
I still
soundtrack is from the movie Fury, that silly Brad Pitt tank movie. That's my go-to soundtrack for game prep. Sorry, Harlan, what were you
No,
saying?
I'm a big stealer of soundtracks too. I think it's like a thing I do. I do the same thing you do, Josh, with like when I'm writing and I want something to be a certain tone, I will listen to certain music to just kind of like get myself in the headspace. But I'm a big like I love like trying to work out music cues for stuff of just like, okay, now you enter this space and this music shifts to here. I have I just reuse the same like metal songs all the time too. There's like these like Sun or just like big doom metal records for big boss fights, and I love that kind of stuff. But I just love trying to create the feeling with music. I'm a big music guy in general, but like just like create the feeling rather than like the soundtrack or anything like that of the tone of the room, which is hard when we're all in our tiny little home boxes. But at the table, it can get really good.
Totally.
Well, can
Very
I roll
cool.
through some
Yeah,
questions? We have a bunch.
Yeah, let's do some. We ran out of time last episode for chat questions, so let's do it.
Cool. Let's do some questions.
Somebody wants to know. Let's see. I'm having a hard time picking because they're all good. Okay, that's just the first one. Someone wants to know, what do you think the right age to start someone playing D&D is? You both run for kids here and there. Do you think, and we've talked a lot about like no dice D&D and just like kind of being creative like that, but do you think there is like a certain kind of like threshold?
It's definitely, your kids' maturity and like how they kind of deal with ambiguity. Maybe I'm like a little bit punishing, but I think like your ability to kind of handle ambiguity and like see where the story goes. I love trying, and I've done it only a couple of times, like in the car D&D on long road trips, where it's like, here's a scenario, how does the player respond? Sometimes the dice is there for like pivotal stuff if they try to do something that like might turn out really bad, but you just kind of like just get in the habit of telling stories together. And I think that when they can participate and say yes and then throw in like a really bonkers detail, then you probably know they're ready.
That's awesome. Road trip D&D is
That's a
I
great
want to
idea.
do that like now.
You could almost do that with two sets of playing cards where the
Yeah.
player pulls a random card out, and if it beats the card that you have drawn or whatever, that could, instead of having to try to keep track of dice in a car, you could use the
Sure.
randomness of a deck of playing cards.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's great.
Another question is, do either of you all use things like potion making or alchemy kits in your games in like a meaningful way? And someone asked like, how do you merge that, if you do or if you don't, maybe intentionally for this reason, like how do you merge that with science and like actual things that you know about the world in this fantasy world?
All of my alchemy, religion, and magic comes from having grown up in weird churches. So I don't necessarily make it scientific. I try to imagine what would I see on a sci-fi show that would be considered sort of crunchy. And I think the aura of like Rigor is probably more effective than like having a 13-page table where you have like a list of alchemical ingredients. At least on my table, I feel like I know what I could like manage cognitively.
Wait, will you say more
so I
about
tend-
the aura of Rigor? I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I want to know what that means, because that feels like a really good phrase.
Like, I don't know, I come out of the arts, so like when professionals talk to each other, they don't like go out of their way to like get into minutia. So like you can kind of like plant a seed for like maybe a couple of herb names, maybe you describe some ephemera in a room, a description of color and smell might help, and like let the player dictate how much energy they want to invest in that activity. But I feel like if the player's excited about it and they have a background in it, let them take the lead of the scene and then add spice and complications. I just know that I don't have a scientific background, but I'm super visual, so I can imagine the scene very clearly, and I want them to kind of like pick out the parts that make sense to them. As far as that,
Oh yeah, go ahead. No, sorry, go ahead.
the only like thing I've ever done is like a few months ago, I had a character die in a game, and it was kind of like super dramatic. They had to travel through a giant sandstorm to get to this particular healer, miles and miles away, and kind of almost on the spot. And I hope the players are eventually going to watch this. Like, how do you call upon the spirit of the land to give something back? And like using that like notion of giving of yourself to convince the land that like what you're trying to return to life is worth it. So like I asked each of the players, like, of your skill set, of your background, of the things you care about, what would you give? And one of my players, who's such a rock star, Cindy, she's a druid, and she's like, I'm gonna make all of my beast shapes no longer have hair. And she like willed her character to like lose all their hair, and they were all in a pool surrounding the body of this, fellow player. Character's name's Vilix, and I didn't know how it was going to go. Each players, I just like all they're going to have to do is like take the metaphor of sacrifice and lean into it. And each person kind of like each character had their own thing, and I didn't really know how it was going to go. I was just like, I trust my players. It's going to be awesome. They have great imaginations, and if I had like, set a arbitrary table of DCs and put the mechanics in front of it, I felt like I probably would have lost that scene.
Yeah, that's awesome. I felt like I was at the table right there, just like you could hear when you describe it that like it was obviously an important moment for you, and it sounds like that scene sounds a lot like what we were talking about with Hannah and Andrew on the previous episode, where we did the scene where we did callbacks to players describing how they feel about being resurrected or not, and I love that. I love it when you see the moment to be like, you guys tell me, like you describe, like you do it because what you would do, and then you get totally surprised by beautiful moments of your players deciding that their animals don't have hair anymore. That's so good. That's so good.
That's great. I've never had a player really push for either of those things, potion making or alchemy. I think if they did, then I would put more effort into it. Sometimes they've asked, like, can I just make potions? And I'm like, no, you can't. You have to learn how. And they don't really push it. But I did have a player who's really interested in cooking a lot. And so what I kind of developed was a system of recipes where he could obtain different ingredients to make certain things. And just like in Zelda Breath of the Wild or any number of other games, it would oftentimes these dishes would impart some sort of temporary stat buff. But it would always have one ingredient that was like hard to get. So now he has this like recipe book of different dishes that he can make. And it can it can kind of alter gameplay just a little bit, but that was just, again, that was based off his interest in it. So then I was like, oh yeah, I'll totally put in the same level of interest. But for alchemy and potions, I haven't really had anyone really press it. So I haven't really gotten into it.
Yeah, that's cool though. I mean, I think anytime you can follow a player and what they're excited about, I think that's right. Yeah. Okay, cool. We're almost out of time, but I want to ask this one more question.
Yeah, we could do some more. We got a little time. Got a couple minutes.
So good old Razor Lou, Moon Boy in the chat asked, what is insight for? And I don't know if that is a joke or not, but I love that question because I think it's more complicated than it seems. So what do you all think?
I think my jokey response, my gut response is insight is the tool the DM has to give hints to the players and make it feel like it's their idea.
Damn, that is a good answer.
Yeah, totally.
And it like helps you kind of like plant seeds for like the world. You can tell them something about the world that their character knows that you haven't had time to get to, and then the players often will run from there.
I know as a DM, when I have an NPC who's lying, and it's like important to the quest that the NPC is lying, and a player gets a crit on on an insight, I'm always like, fuck, like, because I needed this lie, I wanted this to, and that's one of the toughest. I don't want to call them story breakers, but where it's like, oh, I'd kind of planned for this to go in a different direction, but you got to honor that nat 20 and be like, yeah, they're lying, and now all of a sudden everything is disintegrating. But
Yeah, that's good. I think I kind of lie somewhere in between there, where like I'd really like for characters to have secrets, but I also really like telling characters secrets too. So I think I will find excuses to do that, but I also love the moment of like roll this insight check or this perception check, and it's like, oh, I got a 5, and it's like, cool, never mind, like just totally, there's nothing there. Then don't worry about it.
Nothing to see.
It builds that meta tension a little bit.
Yeah, and I think like all the other players are smart enough. They know something's up when you're asking them for those roles.
Yeah.
One of the things I have started to do, and maybe it's just the nature of the game that I'm running and the players, is I will have them like in a scene where none of the players are, and put them in the shoes of like an NPC, and that way they can kind of like go do a thing and see part of the world that the players probably can't get to yet. Like you can reveal an NPC is still alive when they all thought they were dead. You can sort of like give the players that knowledge and trust that they're not going to like completely derail your story. Because like, you know, if the TV show has only 3 characters in a room and it only follows the 3 characters, that can be great. But at the same time, like if you're trying to flesh out, you know, narrative threads, sometimes you need to like let the players drop into other people's shoes in the way the audience does, like give them that situational understanding.
Do you actually have them role play then? Are you like having them make decisions and doing stuff, or is it more of just like you're seeing this through this person's eyes?
Sometimes it's a cutscene. In one instance, we had some NPCs, some of which had been PCs in the scenario. So like they were kind of like reprising roles for their non-primary characters. But we were using a kind of adapted Dungeon World rule set for that scene because I wanted to be fast. And they were just being chased through the sewers by a vampire Goliath and 4 shades. And they were running for their life. And Dungeon World could be very deadly. And so they just like narrowly escaped. One of the characters now in a coma. They were still, because you're kind of dropping them into that situation, they want to protect their character, even if it's not like their primary. And so it added a sense of like, oh, the world's dangerous out there, and maybe you guys are luckier than other people.
That's cool.
Damn, that's cool.
I like that a bunch. Do we have time for any more questions?
I think we got
any more questions?
Yeah, we got to the end of the list, I think.
Oh, awesome.
If I missed one, somebody yell at me, but that was great. That was awesome. I feel this way with every DM at the end, is where I'm just like, let's go play right now. That sounds great.
Yeah, right.
All of your ideas are good. Let's do it. Yeah.
Yeah. Totally. Definitely. Well, yeah, definitely check out Josh's Instagram, every map. Story, is there anything else you want to plug? Anything else you want to mention?
No. Be kind to yourself. You know, give the players more than you want. Just be generous with them. Don't hold back. Secrets die in DM books. Find a way to put them in the world and trust the players, and I think you'll be good.
Cool.
That's
awesome.
That's good. All right.
Never had a DM with a good closing statement before.
Oh boy,
awesome.
I feel that was good advice. Thank you for that.
Thanks. Thanks again for doing the show, and thanks for all of you on Twitch for watching it.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Great
questions.
this week too. And somebody did ask if you would Andrew would DM their kids for first birthday party, but we can bring that up next week. We can talk about that next week.
Yeah, you can just email me.
All right, thanks so much, y'all. Yeah, we'll see you later.
Thank you so much, and don't forget tip your DM. That's my new thing.